Hey guys, today I am going to talk about what happens when you miss a deadline. So, the deadline has been exactly a week as of the posting of this video. The deadline was already extended. I thought they were very generous with the extension that was given. And still, there has been no answer or response. And within the time limit, the plaintiff can ask the court to enter a default judgment against the Frogan. So Frogan didn't respond. The plaintiff typically has to wait maybe a week. It depends on each state before asking, and the plaintiff lawyer does have to contact the defendant's lawyer, figure out if there are medical issues, if there's anything else going on where an answer couldn't be timely submitted. But like I said, they have given already 2 months, so this should have been done in August, early August. We are now in October, so we are a week, almost exactly a week before the previous deadline, or after the previous deadline. So, what is default judgment? Once default is entered, the plaintiff can ask for a default judgment, meaning the court automatically rules in the favor because you didn't respond. You lose the case by default, even if the claim was weak or wrong. Now, here is very interesting. So, damages and attorney fees. So, we're going to talk about in a default judgment, specifically only available in a default judgment. The court decides how much you owe. So, in copyright cases, that can include statutory damages of $750 to $30,000 per work, or if they find that it is willful infringement, it's up to $150,000. So if you are guilty of willful infringement, that's top line, that's the most that you will pay out, is $150,000. Well, many times a lawyer may be more expensive, especially if you're looking at Caseytron and you are looking at Denon's. Their legal teams are very well built, from very respectable, and the more respected the law firm, the more expensive they can be. The more per billable hours or hourly rate they can charge for the billable hours. So you can also get attorney's fees and costs. The court can order you to pay the plaintiff's lawyer injunctions, so they can tell you do not stop distributing the material, seizure or destruction of infringing items, including digital files, right, like USB drives, again, YouTube videos, and so on. So we will then enter, so that's a very important thing, that attorney fees can be awarded if there is a default judgment. And not only will you have to pay the damages, the statutory damages of up to $150,000, the judge can then, judges have broad discretion over attorney fees. Typically speaking, again, we went over the numbers, 10% of all civil lawsuits does the loser pay attorney fees to the winner. 20 to 30% of all copyright lawsuits does the loser pay attorney fees to a winner. So it's still very rare to happen, but in default judgment, it's a little bit more common than that. The exact numbers are unknown, but there's not anyone arguing against giving you attorney fees and costs, up to the judge. So what is the next step after that? Collection and enforcement. Once judgment is entered, plaintiff can use legal tools such as garnishing wages. This was something mentioned by Caseytron that Frogan had told her. Frogan had told Caseytron, and then Caseytron later would say on live stream that Frogan was very worried that her wages would be garnished, almost as she has already surrendered or as is trying to settle, freezing or seizing bank accounts, and then putting liens on property. This would be very relevant to somebody like Caseytron. They could put a lien on her house, which would suck for her. So it's hard, but not impossible to undo. So you can ask the court to set aside the default judgment, but you need to show like a valid excuse. You were sick, your parents were sick, your lawyer was sick, you had problems with your lawyer, a reasonable defense that you didn't actually infringe. For example, Courts will rarely grant this unless you act very fast. So, in addition to having an excuse why you couldn't respond in time, you still have to come up with a defense. If your defense is very weak, they're just going to just stick in default judgment because that's where it is right now. So, the bottom line is ignoring a copyright lawsuit does not make it go away. It hands a victory to a plaintiff. And here, it's interesting because we talk about legal fees a lot. I know you guys get bored of this. But it really could be that Casey Tron and Denon's attorneys are well over $150,000, which is the maximum amount of damage that they would possibly lose. Now, in this case, having had a client in a similar position where it was a lawsuit where the maximum amount of loss was $40,000 and the settlement was around 20, to split the contract right in half, they spent over almost $300,000 to fight over a 40. At no point in time should that happen, right? Because your legal fees, the idea of hiring a lawyer is that they save you money, that they can gain you money, right? So if it costs 10 times as much money to get back the $20,000, then why don't you just pay the $20,000 and go to default judgment? So Frogan's strategy, if I guessing it correctly, where you just give up and it goes to default judgment, Ethan's legal fees will be very minimal compared to what it could be should he have to go to trial. And even if he loses everything, this is kind of the Billy Mitchell versus Carl Job scenario. Even if you lose everything, the damages plus the legal fees at this point in time will be far less than your own lawyer legal fees, especially if you hire a very powerful or very expensive law firm, which I believe Denon's and Casey Tron has done. Casey Tron's in even more difficulty because he not only has that very expensive law firm, he has also a state-specific law firm in Missouri. So it's just a math problem, right? It's a math problem. Is it worth fighting for? And I can tell you many times when I was dealing with that client and I was giving him advice, I'd said, how in the world did this balloon over $100K? And then the invoice came for $300K. I obviously had to look at the itemized list as an attorney myself. I know when they're trying to bill you extra. And we clawed back, I think, $50,000 or $60,000 from just me looking at the itemized list and realizing some of this stuff was double billing, which is illegal, by the way. So maybe this is the strategy. Maybe she's a lot smarter than everyone's giving her credit for. I mean, out of the three, she's the only one with a real job. And we know this because of what Casey Tron said. I don't think you wouldn't be afraid of getting your wages garnished if you didn't actually have a job, right? So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Give this video a like if you like it. Whatever, right? If you don't like it. Bye, guys.